Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We now move on to the fireside chat, the second fireside chat for the day, titled The Black Swan of 2020 of the second fireside chat for the day. Rohit Malkani, Vice President Marketing, Crompton Greaves Consumer Electricals. Ajay Motwani, CMO, Consumer Business, Adani Wilmar. And this chat will be moderated by Ranade, Partner and Head, Customer and Channel, KPMG in India. Avi, over to you.
And so maybe I'll just give a minute or two for Rohit and Ajay to introduce themselves as regards their experience in the industry.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. Thanks, ET, for having me. So I represent Adani Wilmar. I look after marketing, and CPG products is the forte. So we'll spend some time next half an hour to understand what's happening in a post-COVID world.
Rohit?
Hi. So I am the CMO for Crompton Consumer. Okay, and prior to this, I worked with Asian Paints for almost 2 decades, and I worked with Gillette prior to that. So I have a variety of consumer, you could say, durables and some bit of CPG experience as well.
No, excellent. So given the background that you guys bring to the conversation, I'm going to ask a very simple question, because over the last 9 or 10 months, as all of us have lived our lives through this COVID scenario, I'm not going to spend time on what is COVID and how is COVID and all that kind of stuff. But I want to really understand, and maybe the audience, which is what has really changed from the perspective of both of you, from a market perspective and product perspective. If we could maybe spend 3-4 minutes each on what really changed. Maybe Rohit, you can go first.
Sure. So, I think one of the big things that has changed in our world, which is, largely fans, some home appliances, is that the consumer journey, at least a lot of it has started on the digital medium, right? So previously, if you were walking into a store on your way back from work to see, if there's something you're planning to buy, and as you would go through the sort of process, the purchase process, we are seeing a significant shift towards at least a lot of phases moving to digital. And of course, that culminating in purchase as well. But still, the purchase part of it is not as, so of course the growths are at, in multiples, but it's still not as a significant part of what we sell as consumer electricals. But definitely the big change that we're seeing is that consumers want a lot more information online. They want it to be from reliable sources. They want to get all that, going, so that they have all the information to take a decision.
Okay. Ajay, your view?
Yeah, so what we are seeing is a lot of shift from loose to package. So an accelerated conversion of people who were buying loose earlier moving to package. And what's driving this shift is this fear. So a lot of products like rice, like dal, where the consumer picks up the product because he sees certain quality cues. He sees color and height of the grain as a quality cue. And now he is getting scared. So he is moving to packaged. Then we are also seeing a lot of products. For example, we have premium offerings which are functional, which deliver on immunity. And these offerings are seeing heightened traction. So loose to packaged, immunity capabilities, we are shoring up, we are telling consumers about the immunity capabilities also in certain edible oils. And the moment consumers discover this, they are moving towards them. We are seeing accelerated conversion there. And then on the downsizing piece, we are also seeing with pressure on disposable incomes, accessible price points gaining traction. So earlier consumers were buying large packs. There was a time when there was pantry loading, families staying in. Now consumers are buying packs which they consume in within 2 to 3 weeks, and they are replenishing them at pre-COVID levels. So these are the shifts that we are seeing.
Okay, so quite interesting. Given the difference in the industries that the two of you are in, the next question is around, but how has this changed? Because till now, and I would say going forward is going to be quite interesting. How does the industry change in the sense that there's the FMCG company, and then there's the wholesaler, distributor, retailer, and then there's the consumer. So, how does that change from a perspective of the relationship, the agreements, the reach to the consumer at the end? How does that work? How does that change going forward, according to you? Because there's this interim phase, right? Like today, because of COVID, we operate in a certain fashion. But going forward, does that really change or does it remain the same? So, Ajay, maybe you can start first.
Okay, so what we are seeing is that e-commerce is gaining heightened traction. So there is a leapfrogging in terms of its adoption. And this is coming at the cost of the brick and mortar modern trade store. So consumers would shop at brick and mortar stores because of the pleasurability of the entire experience. But he is now fearing these spaces. The traditional kirana store, the small kirana store next to your house, it has been quite agile. So in times when e-commerce didn't have labor to deliver goods during the lockdown, and she was fearing going to the brick and mortar modern trade store, the kirana store is what came to her rescue. We have had instances where even our distributors could not supply goods to these kirana stores, and these kirana stores would manage their own logistics, and they would come to our distributors, go down and pick up these goods, and in turn cater to the customer. So that agility during those months of April and May when there was severe lockdown is what is holding this channel in good stead. E-commerce is gaining traction because they offer you the convenience of being able to see the entire range, contactless delivery, convenient, nice prices, value deals, etc., etc. So e-commerce is gaining. The traditional kirana store is holding its own, and they had a gap. They were not digitized enough. So the traditional kirana store is also evolving. It is able to send WhatsApps to its customers, and it is able to mention prices of certain items. So they are also reaching the customer, and in a way that is convenient to her. So this innovation on the part of this channel and the e-commerce as a platform having inherent traction is putting a lot of pressure on the brick and mortar modern trade store. So in a nutshell, we see two channels growing, and we see a third channel struggling to keep pace. Now, yes, with time, there will be a few consumers who would want to recreate the pleasure of having shopping in a large format store, and these consumers would go back. But e-commerce, where a lot of new people have come in, we expect a lot of them would stick on because these kind of conveniences are hard to ignore. The convenience of contactless delivery, the convenience of having a range, the convenience of value. These are fundamentally strong conveniences. So a lot of consumers who have acquired these new behaviors, who have now become native to the e-commerce platform, will stay on. And that will probably come at the expense of more at the expense of the brick and mortar store and less at the expense of the traditional kirana store.
Got it. So, and I think what you're saying absolutely makes sense because we're not talking about products which are fashion oriented, which is about the experience of shopping, right? We're talking about convenience and price. So, absolutely 100% makes sense. Rohit, what's your view from your side of the world?
So, I'll not reference Kirana stores because not much of our products sell through Kirana stores. But the classical electrical and hardware store that you would have would be the equivalent of a Kirana store for us. See what has definitely happened, right? Is that people are looking at options that are contactless. But if you take a category like ours, the purchases are the now and immediate purchases and the planned purchases. So if you're renovating a house, you can take some more time to choose what kind of lights you want, what kind of fans you want, and sort of build it in a little more planned process. Right, definitely that part of consumers have gone slow during these last 6 months, or 8 months as it is. What is what the here and now? When you have a breakdown, many of the products that we cater to are essential in that sense. In the peak of summer, if your fan is broken down or your air cooler is broken down, you're going to go and replace it. As winter sets in, if your geyser breaks down, you have to replace it. So what we see, and that's what were the things that across industries you are picking up, right? Rural demand is still high because people are still stepping out of the house and not being locked down at home. So we did see, as things panned out, what we saw is that the breakdown demand or the replacement demand of products was as practically as robust as it could be. With the sort of metros being fear centers where people didn't want somebody coming into their house, right? So if you look at your home as your safe zone, and that's where you don't want to let the virus and anything else in, and people are being super careful about that. So people postpone repairs, breakdowns, and so on and so forth. That's something that we saw. But as things have progressed now, in the breakdown case, people were going to their neighborhood electrical hardware store, buying it, getting the electrician to sort of do it if it was essential. And what we're seeing is that that trend, while there's been a lean forward towards, e-com, but definitely the role of the local store has probably become that much more robust because they've been able to provide solutions for people, like even Ajay referenced, whether it's WhatsApp. They've had contactless solutions. They've said that we'll sanitize the place after I'll send an electrician who will sanitize the house after we replace your fan, and so on and so forth. So people have evolved to sort of take care of the situation, and in many ways, I think they have regained consumer confidence. The local store has regained consumer confidence in a big way in all of this.
Okay, no, so thanks, but I'd like to sort of maybe ask a difficult question, which is around how does this change the relationship between you and your customer, which has traditionally been the wholesaler, distributor, retailer, and the consumer, who is sort of almost like a third party, in today's age when suddenly the whole e-commerce platform has come live and is no longer a hype? And maybe, Rohit, you can start with your response on that. Yeah.
So, see, what's, the relationship, if you ask me, has changed to the extent that, our so-called bricks and mortar customers, if I were to call wholesale dealers, distributors as that, they are also finding ways to digitize and finding ways to be part of the whole digital ecosystem in that sense, right? Whether they're getting onto, all sorts of networks to figure that out. At the same time, what's happening, like I told you, if the consumer journey is starting online, right, and some of them want it to culminate online, what's happening is that companies have to provide a digital, fulfillment, right, whether it is through an e-com player or it is through their own mechanism. And, so there is that shift that even the general trade, as we call it, is seeing that, companies are providing more and more solutions on this front. a lot of our customers are coming back to us saying that how is it that we can be a part of the journey, right? So if you look at the sort of other models that seem to be evolving, whether it is BOPIS that people talk about, which are practically in own stores, but people are looking at even multi-brand outlets serving as last point delivery mechanisms, right, for consumers, that where the journey could start digitally and end physically. So the relationship, I think, is what's happened is that everyone's been forced to take cognizance of how they can digitally evolve and compete and stay relevant. So I think that's a very big thing that's happened, and everybody's sort of reevaluating how that works. But if you ask me, the relationships have not really changed significantly. Other than saying that how do we partner better, and that whole thing of partnership has come up in a much stronger way.
Okay, Ajay, what about your
Very,
part of it?
very interesting question. How has relationship changed? This channel is actually in a lot of flux at this point of time. The Kirana store has the option of buying from a B2B e-commerce platform as well as buying from a traditional distributor. Now, our traditional distributor is seeing competition after a long time, and he is having to evolve in terms of service timelines, in terms of pricing, because you have platforms like Uran, which are offering price, which are offering service, 1-day service, 24-hour service, which are offering credit. And now the traditional distributor has to compete with this platform. So he is becoming a lot more demanding from us in terms of pricing. He is looking at the same pricing that we would probably extend to a brick and mortar modern trade channel, to a B2B e-commerce platform, to a B2C e-commerce platform, say Amazon, say Flipkart. So that entire transparency and equitable pricing model is coming. One. Two, the consumer also is becoming fairly demanding. The consumer has the choice of looking at price between different e-commerce platforms and then comparing it with brick and mortar modern trade stores as well. The e-commerce platforms are competing amongst themselves. There are apps which have the job of only monitoring price of key fast-selling SKUs on different platforms, and then the e-commerce platforms get back to us and complain in a way that why is this platform able to sell at a lower price? Why is this brick and mortar store able to sell at a lower price? So the entire relationship is becoming a lot more transparent, a lot more responsive, a lot more multidimensional versus initially, let's say the manufacturer always had an upper hand in terms of the relationship. So it is now becoming a more equitable and a more, from a transactional relationship, it is becoming a lot deeper. And we are finding ourselves engaging a lot more with our traditional distributors, with B2B e-commerce, B2C e-commerce, and with the brick and mortar modern trade stores. So the entire space is evolving dramatically.
So bit of a controversial question for both of you, which is around what really changes going forward, because we as human beings, we sort of go through these kind of situations, and in my lifetime and yours, I'm sure this is sort of the first one where for 9 months we're sort of working from home and natural transactions don't happen as they used to happen in the past. But my view is that from January or February onwards, people are going to start sort of moving out and doing what they did in the past, saying that we've got to live with this COVID situation. What's your view? Are we just going to go back to what we were and this was a blip? And how do things actually change? What's really going to happen going forward? What's the difference? What's the hype versus reality?
Okay.
Ajay, you can.
Okay. Interesting. Hype versus reality. So See, the longevity of this new behavior is something which is going to create stickiness. In ordinary times, you learn a new behavior and then you go back to your old behaviors if you don't adopt it for a long time. But this longevity of 9 to 12 months, and coupled with the fact that these are fundamentally agreeing with consumer hot buttons. Let's say the need for health. I mean, that's not going to go away. The need for improved immunity, that's not going to go away. The need for convenience, the need for having goods delivered at your doorstep on platforms, which are as good as physical platforms. You're able to see among thousands of brands and among thousands of SKUs and make a conscious value creating decision. Convenience of payment. So, sorry. So because these are so fundamentally aligned with consumer needs, these will not go away. So my take is that shopping on e-commerce is not going to go away. The concern for immunity, yes, you are right. It is heightened at this point of time. In fact, what we also experienced is that demand for sanitizers and hand washes, which was at its peak in June, July, is now cooling off. So yes, while overall hygiene practices will improve and people will wash their hands much more often, and a lot more people will wash their hands, penetration of these categories will improve. It will not stick at pre-COVID level. It will not stick at existing COVID levels, but it will not go back to pre-COVID levels as well. It will settle somewhere in between. Then let's come to this entire digital relationship. So we found out that we are able to be we come from a traditional CPG practice perspective, and we felt that, you had to work in teams, you had to meet up, and you would have multidisciplinary teams, somebody from logistics, somebody from finance, somebody from product development. And we've discovered that we are able to get out so many new products in the market without physically meeting. And so we feel that it is much more effective and efficient to engage in this way. And I think we will continue to work that. So Avi, to answer your questions, I think it will be a fairly mixed bag, but we will stay on with more adopted behaviors than we will drop.
No, interesting, because, and I'm sure it will be quite different compared to what Rohit will say now, because I think, as usual in India, we tend to start with the hype, and we tend to sort of say that all industries and sectors behave in the same way, and it's homogenized across the country, which we know. There are 156 Indias, and the sectors will all behave differently. So, Rohit, what's your view?
See, I think a lot of what Ajay has said is I think what is the reality. Though the only point of difference that I have is that it's not been a consistent 9 months. Even the 9 months of of COVID has the first few months were frenzy. Then you had people coming to terms with it at whatever level, and then now people sort of being, I would say, brave and brazen about it in a way, right? So I think what's happened is that even from a consistent adoption of behavior perspective, I think what people have gone is through a major spike, and then they've sort of figured out where they are now. So the way I see it is that there are two things, right? One is are people what are they seeking? And I think some of the themes that Ajay mentioned, I think convenience as a theme is something that people have sort of embraced at this point of time, and that as a theme is not going anywhere, right? Whether it is payment, whether it is delivery, whether it is whatever bit, and like I said, digitally examining products and seeing what's available and doing whatever tolmol that you would do for products, right? All that part, that convenience part is I think a huge theme. The other theme that has come in, especially for categories like ours, is what is it around home, I think all of us have sort of got more endeared to our homes during this period, and we found that how is it that we make home, a great place. So, that's so. The other part is previously what was, and probably for a lot of people who are working, just a place to sort of, recuperate, rest, and sort of bathe, eat, and get back to whatever you were doing the next day. I think the home is going to play an integral part and a very critical part in how families evolve, in how relationships evolve, and whatever else happens, right? And companies like ours that work in the home improvement space, there are trends that people are talking about which are a lot more far out. But what we would expect to see in the future is that people, taking a much more holistic view of home plus office, home plus work, sort of intermingling together, and how does that sort of evolve into whether you call it a co-living space as opposed to a co-working space. I think those are trends that we're definitely going to see picking up in a much bigger way. And that's so that there the underlying theme is also going to be a lot of, let's say, comfort, and so convenience that Ajay spoke about, comfort in people are really going to evaluate traveling 1.5 hours to go to office and coming back now, and I think Ajay very nicely said that they've been able to launch so many new products by not physically meeting, right? So the challenging of assumptions, and I think that's the other big thing from every consumer's perspective, is that what was real a year ago probably is not real now, right? And you can keep challenging assumptions and keep sort of expecting something different and new to come up. So I think that's the other thing that has got sort of subtly ingrained, in people's heads, that change can move at a much faster pace, and it doesn't have to be the brought about by conventional ways or the way that you expected it the most. So I think that's the other thing that we see.
No, I think what you and Ajay have said makes sense, but sort of what I've been hearing from, I'm in a professional services organization, and tend to deal with a lot of the similar folk as regards my friends and family. And the hype around what you said, that, okay, home improvement, which you pointed out, that let's make my home more comfortable from a working and living perspective. Let's not forget that a large part of the population is not actually living in a very large home or a house.
Sure.
And it's quite small, and husband and wife both working with at least one kid, going through homeschooling, and at least one set of parents at home. In maybe a 750 to 1,000 square foot sort of area.
Yeah.
So those kind of practical realities don't change. And that's a larger part of the population, which we got to sort of understand.
So Avi, I just sort of interrupt you there, So, For example, to have even in that space, lighting that you've got at home is just look at the difference between the lighting in Ajay's frame and my frame, right? When we speak, right? I'm speaking from a home that's not designed to give you the desired light output on your workbench.
Same with me, and I'm bald, so it just shines off my head.
So where I'm coming from is, when I'm saying home improvement, is it that if I'm sitting here in this corner and working and my family is in the same room, I might need a tower fan sitting next to me to keep me cool, right? I might need a light above my head to keep me cool, to ensure that my workplace is lit up, right? That's what I'm referring to as home improvement. I'm not saying that it's going to be, roses and daisies all the way, right? That's not what it is. But it is, how is it that you are enabling all of that to take place in whatever is that environment,
Got it. Ajay, any comments to make? I think we're on the hour now, but any last comments to be made, Ajay?
I love the piece Rohit said about the home evolving from a home to a co-living, co-working space. So I think that's spot on. And you also write that 70% of India is villages, and we have large families, joint families, small homes, grand homes. But I guess the progression will be linear and not exponential.
Yes, I agree. And in fact, one of the questions that was asked to me, which I'm trying to answer from a client, is can my people charge me rent for working from home? Is that going to be a commercial establishment? And yeah, because a lot of companies starting off tried to sort of say, I'm going to reduce office space to cut costs. But I don't think they thought about the fact that you cut costs, but you're infringing on someone's home.
True.
And how does that work legally, taxation-wise, whatever? So there are a lot of questions to be answered thanks to COVID and the situation we're in. Rohit, any last comment? So we move over and hand over to.
No, so just to add on that, on what we've seen is at so the initial investments at home have all been in infrastructure, right? And that's typically been digital infrastructure. So if your kid needs to study, even down the pop strata, right? Maids have been getting their kids a phone, so that they can connect to classes. Right, and this is at least what I've seen in convent schools in Bombay, right? So the first investments have happened in the basic infrastructure, right? Whatever is a digital connect device and a connection. The next are going to sort of be about how you can sort of make that place a little more, and that's why it's a phased investment, and that's why we see it coming next year or even further down. How people start looking at these spaces, because it's a reality that there is going to be some kind of shift. How big or how small, we'll have to see, and we'll have to keep our eyes and ears peeled. But that's what we definitely see.
No, thank you very much, Rohit and Ajay. Both of you have given your background and your experience and the sort of subsectors that you're in, while we sort of tend to frame everything as FMCG, is quite different. Thank you very much. So, Ivan, over to you.
Thank you, Avi. Yes, there are a lot of questions to be answered. And I'm sure going forward, we will get those answers driven by what the customer says. Like Ajay said, a lot of assumptions are being challenged. A lot of paradigms are shifting. And yes, the answers will be found. But thank you, gentlemen, for tabling a lot of initiatives that have happened and will happen going forward. I'm sure all of us are leaving with some very important takeaways in terms of rewriting the Customer Experience Rulebook. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Ajay. And thank you, Avi, so much for moderating this wonderful fireside chat. All the best to each of you and your respective organizations going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, do stay tuned in. We will be back in a couple of minutes with the third keynote address of the day.